We have John Sanborn, Willie Stevens, myself, Matt Gagner. We have looks like a pretty full agenda tonight. I'm going to start off on, let me just look at this here. 6 o'clock, I'm going to do a presentation to Casella. So, Tom and Tracy, you guys want to come up, or you want to sit there? Or? Thank you very much. I know this board's asked you a few times for the extended courtesy bottled water program last time, and I know you have to ask your people. Last time you didn't think it was going to happen. We asked you, you got it to happen. You've been doing it for quite some time now. The board talked about it, and we are grateful that you've done that, and we feel as though we wanted to give you a certificate, show our appreciation for the courtesy bottled water. Hopefully we can keep it going, but for right now, this is what you've done in the past, and we appreciate that very much. So on behalf of the Charlton Board of Health and myself, we have a certificate of appreciation to you guys, and thank you very much for doing that. We appreciate that.
So thank you very much.
Certificate.
Tom and I, on behalf of the entire team that we work with, we do know how much the board appreciates that courtesy bottled water program, and I'm very happy to say that I'm glad we've been able to work on it together thus far.
And it's not the board; it's all about the residents, as you know.
Yep.
And,
you have expressed that many times.
Yep. You don't have to do it. It's not by law, and you guys are getting it done for us. Thank you very much.
We sincerely appreciate this gesture. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jason. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is going to be Gary with you from CMG Environmental. Gary's our consultant with an environmental impact here with H-Foot Road water discussion. So Gary, I know we've had a pretty busy 2 weeks since our last meeting. Do you want to bring us up to speed and give us the updates where we stand?
Yes. As historically, I've provided a memo. If anybody wants it, you can grab it. It's right here. I'll kind of go through the bullet points quickly, and then any of the key points you can ask questions after. So I think the biggest document is the August 8th IRA status report that was submitted to DEP. I'm still going through that. It's an extensive document. I think the most important thing for the board and for the residents, I know that the authors of that report say many times in there, it's not the landfill, it's not the operations, it's not. And they have outlined some possible scenarios of other sources. I've talked to DEP on this and a bunch of other things related to this site over the past 2 weeks, and I was pleased to hear that they have several people in their office reviewing that document. I was told in excess of 5 people are currently reviewing that document, hydrogeologists, geologists, surface water specialists, to provide their opinion. I don't know whether or not DEP will provide a written opinion or not, but they are reviewing it with a lot of effort and concern. So questions come back to this board of, well, what does that mean, or can we do something, or can I write a letter to say something? And I continue to tell the residents that they don't have to convince me, they've got to convince DEP. And I was very pleased to hear that there's multiple folks at DEP reviewing those documents right now. So I think that's a good thing. The IRA status report did say that DEP, the potentially responsible party, may ask DEP for help getting into some of the properties. I know that DEP has been in contact with Ty and Bond, and they said they will help get access agreements if necessary, but they're mandating that the non-specified PRP go through the appropriate steps of the MCP, send public notice, try to get access, and if they can't get access, DEP will help them. So those wheels are in motion to get access onto some of these other properties. DEP is not doing anything at this point. They're telling the non-specified PRP to do what they're supposed to do. Point of entry treatment systems, as of the last meeting, 58, 70, and 89. I know there's been discussions. I have not personally seen any update on those. Have you guys come to an agreement?
Yes,
Okay. Did they give you an installation date
they're coming on Friday.
Excellent.
Not to install,
to do their
do a
inspection?
site visit.
Okay, so that's moving relatively quickly. Obviously, we'd like to see it faster, but it's moving. In the last 2 weeks, I received, but the Board of Health received 3 separate emails regarding data from the July residential sampling events. And those detections resulted, or that data set resulted in 5 new detections that DEP consider new critical exposure pathways that require provision of bottled water, and more importantly, ultimately considering providing POET systems for those addresses. So I have a bullet list here. 1,4-dioxin was detected at 85 around 0.5, and a bunch of other VOCs below the drinking water standard, 5 other VOCs. 54 had a confirmed detection of chlorobenzene below the drinking water standard. So that was the first confirmed one there. 59 confirmed detection of tetrachloroethylene, relatively low, 0.1, standards 5. 75 had 1,4-dioxin at a pretty moderate concentration, 0.5 to 0.6 ppb. And 66 had 1,4-dioxin at a more alarming concentration, as high as 0.8. And these samples, as I think everyone in the room knows, once they have a detection in the primary sample, they're required to run the duplicate sample so that they can compare the two. And in most cases, the duplicates are very similar. So these are confirmed detections. Ty and Bond notifies the Board of Health as required by the regulations. They also notify DEP. The notifications we get are not completely clear in that this is a new IRA site or this may extend the 500-foot radius. So I've been throwing responses back to the email saying, thanks for the information, but I don't know off the top of my head if 66 is a new detection without going through all the data. So I'm asking them to provide some of that information to us. Is this a new detection? Does this trigger provision of bottled water on the mandatory list? Does this affect the 500-foot radius? Haven't gotten a response back on that, but they've been pretty responsive so far with my other requests. So I'm assuming that the next set of emails that we get will answer those questions as well, rather than just, here's a whole bunch of data. Been talking with DEP a little bit. It sounds like DEP has taken the position that chlorinated VOCs or VOCs can be treated in private drinking water wells. Therefore, the stance will be a POET system should be installed if there are confirmed VOC detections. That's not in writing yet from DEP, but it's definitely moving in that direction. We're seeing it with the 3 homes we're talking about, and these new detections, I believe DEP has already talked to the non-specified PRP and said, you should look at POET systems. The bottled water list has obviously changed a little bit. I did an analysis to try to figure out these 5 new homes, where they fit in as far as did they have bottled water, were they on the courtesy bottled water, or were they not on bottled water. My analysis showed that 2 of them were already getting bottled water, 2 were on courtesy, and 1 was not getting anything. And unfortunately, the one that wasn't getting anything was in the, if you guys recall, when the courtesy bottled water agreement came out, there was a map drawn that showed the homes that were potentially eligible, and based on my look at that map, 54 was not getting bottled water, and they were in that area of potentially eligible homes. So that's a little bit of a shame.
Can I cut in? On that particular house, do you know if there's people living in there?
I do not know.
Yes.
Yeah, 54.
Yep, John Mahan.
So, and then the last point I think is the most important thing, and I don't think it's shocking, but I'll just read what I have. The July 2016 round of residential sampling showed many changes and increases in contaminant concentrations. The initial DEP notice of impact to drinking water wells in September 2005 included 3 homes with detections. Now, with most of the July data in hand, there appears to be confirmed detections in 11 homes. So, the situation is not stable. To be very honest, frank with everyone here, I was quite pleased to see the April data because not a lot changed. There was not a lot of new detections. Things were very stable. This data is definitely more concerning.
So Gary, just on that last point, the July 2016 round, we've had 5 more hits of, are they all 1,4-dioxane?
They're not all 1,4-dioxane. A couple of them are chlorinated.
Okay.
VOCs.
But at the end of the day, the quality of water is going down, it's getting worse.
Yeah, and not to put words in your mouth, but moderately, significantly. This group and these residents were standing here in October with 3 or 4 confirmed homes, and now we have, it looks like 11 to be, and I'm not even sure all of July data is in, because I haven't validated that.
So you and I talked about it, and my goal is to try to get courtesy bottled water for those people eligible, to try and request that from DEP through the potential critical exposure pathway. And this last statement shows that the situation is getting worse. It's not improving, it's not stable, it's getting worse. With that information, can you, or will you, or have you brought that to the authorities of DEP, meaning Mr. Dowse, Mr. Baldy, and said, this is what we see. We've asked you several times for courtesy bottled water to be mandated for those that deserve it in that particular area. And look we just had 2 more detections. Those people were on courtesy bottled water. So do you think there's a way that this data can be presented to DEP from this board showing it's getting worse? What's it going to take to get more people on this courtesy bottled water?
What's it gonna take to get water brought to the neighborhood? How many more homes are we gonna do? I appreciate the fact that you're doing something, trying to get bottled water, but it's almost a year since this started. We're gonna turn this into another ExxonMobil fiasco.
Well, we're hoping it's not. At the last meeting, we actually discussed that, and you talked about, because Southbridge Recycling saying, no, in fact, the data shows that it's not from us, and no, we're not interested in putting municipal water in. So, since then, we've had this new round showing things are getting worse. So, yeah, municipal water would be.
If you think they're not responsible, what would make you think if things are getting worse that they're gonna say, oh yeah, now we're really responsible? If they've already said, no, we're not responsible?
The DEP doesn't buy it, they're not buying the report.
Right. And I think there's a couple components to answer your question. The first one is DEP has mandated that they must address the ability or the need to provide. They must address public water in their IRA status reports. They've also said you have to provide one every 60 days now. So this status report that we have here clearly says the non-specified PRP or the landfill doesn't believe it's them. Fine. They owe another one in 60 days. There's a lot of new data. So maybe the same statement comes out. At some point, unfortunately, I can't, the board, we can try. At some point, DEP is going to be the one that's going to have to say, no, we don't agree with your position that it's not you. What we do have, to answer Matt's question, is I'm here to help the board understand the regulations and help you guys make sure that you're protected to the best of your ability in compliance with DEP's regulations. The DEP regulations do not mandate bottled water if it's not a CEP. There's not a section in the MCP that I can find a CEP, a critical exposure pathway. So confirmed detection, your critical exposure, a house that has a confirmed detection now is a confirmed critical exposure pathway, bottled water is mandated.
I mean, you did say that that made 11, but that kind of minimizes what's really been going on. If you go back to when we first started looking at this, and I know John has all the data, those are 11 that have actually exceeded this standard, but it was like 55 different, not 55, 28 homes, John, that have shown detections, although not above.
That was last year, yeah. I think. Some were J hits, but
Well, that's
yeah.
the thing, it's the J hit. So we, without getting in this, DEP has clearly said,
They
A
weren't
J
all
hit?
J hit. Some of them
No.
were below the standard, and they were.
but again, below the standard confirmed detection
Right.
is this critical exposure pathway, and they're provided bottled water.
Even if it doesn't exceed the standard.
Yes, sir.
As far back as when, do you think?
Yeah,
We had some in
why were we
2014.
on
I mean,
courtesy?
these, them,
That's what's, see, there's, I'll be very frank with you, I can't figure out how it started. In 2015, when the three homes kind of, we got a lot of data. They called DEP and said, oh boy, we have a problem. DEP said, you now went from the solid waste program to the 21E hazardous waste program, which says, if you have a detection in a drinking water well, confirmed, of a contaminant of concern at the site, which at this point is the landfill, that's a critical exposure pathway, you have to deal with it. I agree, there is, and there were data prior to that, that is not, wasn't included in that notification. And I believe the reason for that is a landfill is considered an adequately regulated property. So if you have a landfill that's adequately regulated, and associated with that, you're testing residential wells, and you test a residential well and get a detection above a confirmed detection, but not above a drinking water standard, and they address it as adequately regulated, not in the 21E MCP program, it kind of just never gets addressed. And now that this site is a 21E hazardous waste site, everything gets looked at. But the homes in 2014, I don't really have a good answer for you.
Garrett, just one second. Last meeting, we talked about slugs in the filters. We shot off an email, you asked a question. You got a response back, I read it, you read it. You explained it to me very well. Can we talk about that?
We can. Your husband had some great concerns and questions, so I put an email together. I apologize, I want to bring a copy of that, but it's available here, and we can forward it to you. So I sent an email to protocols through Tracy, but to Ty and Bond, with basically paraphrasing the questions that were asked. Is there a concern of a slug? Can they test the media? So Ty and Bond responded Friday afternoon about 5 o'clock. And so their first answer relates to the systems and how they're installed and how they work. Essentially, they're saying they don't believe a slug will be released, and I'll explain to you why, and we'll let you read their email as well. So the way the system works is it's 2 carbon filters. Water comes into a house, goes through the first carbon filter, the contaminants get absorbed to the carbon media. The contaminants are adsorbed to that media, and then the water flows into the second carbon filter. If the first carbon filter, all the adsorption sites get full, then it gets collected on the second carbon filter. Every month, the potentially responsible party collects a sample pre-mid, which is between the first and second filter, and post, which is the drinking water sample. The concept being, once you have any detections in the mid sample, the argument is the carbon has adsorbed everything, or mostly what it can, and you have a detection in that middle zone. So so what you do immediately is you go out and you take that carbon unit, you take it out of the system, and you take the second one and you pull it back and make it the first one, and then you take a new one or replace that other one and put it over here so that your second one is brand new. concept being that it would take much longer than a month to go through both of the units because you've got historical data for months and months and months showing the influent concentration and the concentration in the mid. And what they said in their email is the mid concentrations have been non-detect consistently for 6 to 8 months in those wells. So that means that the second carbon hasn't even been used. I agree with that. Technically, we put carbon systems in, that's exactly why you sample in between them. So I don't have a problem with that technically. Question came up of, can you sample the carbon? And the response was, that's not normally done, and it's not a good indicator parameter, because the best indicator parameter is just, again, sample the pre, mid, and the post to evaluate the effectiveness of the carbon. Then he answered the question of the slug, and they acknowledged that 1,4-dioxane is being adsorbed, grabbed, whatever by the carbon, but yet the carbon is not designed to do that. The carbon is preferential for the chlorinated VOCs. So the argument could be that a adsorption site has a molecule of 1,4-dioxane on it. As a molecule of TCE comes in, the TCE would preferentially grab onto that adsorption site, and the 1,4-dioxane would migrate off. So the fact that the concentrations coming in are, don't take this negatively because I am concerned as well, the concentrations coming in are very, very low for a carbon system. Systems can handle hundreds of parts per billion. So we have very low concentrations coming in. So if an adsorption site lost its 1,4-dioxane and picked up a chlorinated VOC, that 1,4-dioxane that was absorbed there is going to get picked up and absorbed on the next one. So that's how they answered is there a likelihood of a slug? They essentially said they couldn't come up with a technical argument as to how a slug would be released. Because, again, it's a single site. It has to go to a site, grab on, and then move off. So on a technical level, I agree with what they said. That is industry standard. I do still have a similar concern that it's not designed to remove 1,4-dioxane. It is. Bottled water still being provided, and we still need to be cautious about it. But at least we know, and you're getting data every month to show how it's working. Obviously, if things change and there are detections in the mid, at that point, it's possible that the LSP or DEP might say, we want you to test every 2 weeks. I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's probable, given the data that we have in hand, because we haven't seen any data that even shows, I have to double check, but even any breakthrough to the mid-carbon yet.
So Gary, you're talking about 1,4-dioxane and TCE, so what's happening when you have TCE, 1,4-dioxane, and 6 different VOCs?
So-
Now that's a myriad of things that are going through there. It's
All the
magnifying the
VOCs,
amount of things
yeah.
that are gonna get potentially trapped and released at once.
Well, all the VOCs, again, are going to have more affinity to carbon than the 1,4-dioxane.
Right.
So, again, by testing pre, mid, and post, you can evaluate the effectiveness of how that carbon holds those VOCs. Just as an example, MTBE, because it's just so prevalent in the area. Systems are removing MTBE at 30, 40 parts per billion for 6 months, a year, before you see any kind of breakthrough whatsoever, 2-3 years in some cases. So you're talking 40 or 50 parts per billion. We are seeing this last round, there was, some of the concentrations were 11 parts per billion, 6 parts per billion for some of the chlorinated solvents. So you add those together, I mean, some of the houses might be as high as 20 total chlorinated VOCs. But again, with the double unit and the testing in between, and the history, 65 is pretty bad, and we've got 8 months of data that shows that the carbon is effectively working. So I certainly can't provide you 100% assurance that everything's going to work perfect, but what I can tell you is if involved with it, I would do it the same way. And the monthly sampling is appropriate. But again, if we start getting detections in that mid-sample after 1 or 2 months, there's a legitimate argument that you need to sample more frequently. When the systems are installed, they sample them on days, I want to say 1, 4, and 7, and then weekly for a month, and then monthly thereafter. So it's a pretty conservative approach. And that email's available for anybody.
Gary, thank you for explaining that. I know there's a lot to it, but it makes a lot of sense the way you said it, and thank you for getting through that. Well,
A couple of things. Right away with the filtration systems, the poets, if they're doing such a good job, which by your data there they are, why is bottled water still being provided?
Systems are not designed to remove 1,4-dioxane.
There you go. Okay? So no matter what, it's not designed for it. Even Casella knows that, DEP knows that. It's not a fix. Again, going back to the fix is municipal water. Casella has come out and said publicly now that they are not responsible, they are not pursuing municipal water. Does this board have a plan to get municipal water to myself and my neighbors?
right now, Will, this board does not have a plan for that.
Okay.
Not to say we're not talking about it, but I can't sit here and say, this is what we've done and this is where we're going with it.
And again, it's a short window that they've, all along, we've been pursuing Casella to what we feel do the right thing and go proceed with municipal water. They've now, in my mind, dug their heels in with the advent of the hydrological study, which is what I think they're banking on. Having said that, has the board given thought to hiring their own hydrologist to look at this data and not just accept the word of Casella's paid and bought for hydrologists? Have an independent party look at this.
We've talked about that before, and again, Gary knows the ins and outs of it, but, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but the people doing those tests are qualified, they're licensed in the state of Massachusetts as a third party. So this board is accepting what they have for data because they're a licensed professional company. I mean, to falsify or deviate from what is allowed would put these companies in jeopardy. Gary, I mean, you were saying some of these companies are huge. Ty and Bond is huge. And
Well, I think there's just a little clarification needed. The data is the data. I don't think it's, I agree with Matt wholeheartedly. You can't, the data I don't believe is being falsified. Your position, I believe, is more how the consultants for the potentially responsible party are providing an opinion on that data. I can't think of a situation where a municipality would be providing the technical review or opinion of that. They have to pass by DEP. And DEP has the power, the capacity, and the monetary support to get some of the best hydrogeologists around to look at that data. And they've got to convince them.
Gary, if I may, and well, I'll go right back to you, but you opened up the meeting saying DEP's on it. They've got 5+ individuals looking at this very closely. So does that help answer Will's question? They're the ones that are determining interpretation of the data, correct?
I hope it does, Will. That's why I brought that up. Because
That's the IRA, correct, that they're looking at? Are they looking at the hydrological study?
Well, they are, because it's
Is that
attached
part
to it.
of? It is attached to the
Yeah.
IRA.
So, there's two things going on. Obviously, they're asking for an expansion. We're not talking about that right now.
No.
DEP has clearly said, this IRA is, that data you're collecting for that expansion you need to use in support of this IRA, and you must provide that data every 60 days. So the folks at DEP that are, the hydrogeologists that are looking at this information, whether or not they're looking at it for expansion or for source of contamination, they're looking at it the same way. And to pacify DEP, there has to be enough data, and it has to be presented in a fashion that DEP's internal staff and even consultants potentially, I don't know, are going to look at that and say, yep, we agree, there's no way, it's impossible that it came from this source. And I don't think we're anywhere near that realm
We
at this
can't
point.
be, again, not to interrupt, but the eyeball test tells you they're not reading this hydrologist report properly because we've got new detections. I don't believe this, I'm not gonna ask this question of you, but I don't believe anybody in this room thinks that those detections are coming from anywhere other than the landfill. And the smoke and mirrors gets me really upset. I mean, it's plain to me that the hydrologist report is wrong. The water is flowing from the landfill towards my neighbors. It's a plume, you can see it getting bigger. We've gone from 8 to 11, next year it's gonna be 22, who knows? But again, this is why I ask, we need to refute this hydrologist report because that's what Casella's banking on, why they're not even entertaining municipal water.
I think I can help. You want to go? Go ahead.
I'm off topic. If you,
I think mine's on topic.
You go
Hopefully
and then
answer
I'll
his
go.
question. The non-specified PRP must prove that it's someone else before they can get off the hook. So just,
Just a clarification, that's the non-specified one has to, or the specified one has to? Potentially, right? You got,
both,
okay,
both. DEP has listed potentially responsible parties.
yep.
DEP's regulations will not, my read of the regulation and
Have they
involvement.
listed more than Casella?
I'm sorry?
Have they listed more than Casella at this point?
As the PRP,
There's not been a notice of responsibility issue. Right now, there's a non-specified PRP submitting reports to address this issue. That party has said they don't think it's them. That party has the obligation, in accordance with the regulations, to provide enough data to DEP so that DEP says, if that party wants to get out of responsibility, they have to provide enough data to DEP to say, and convince DEP that that's not them.
And again, this is someone other than Casella.
At this point, the non-specified PRP reports are signed by a member that works for Casella. Sam, whatever his last name is.
and they've pointed the finger, for lack of a better term, at 4 other potentially
At least.
responsible parties, at least.
Has
They can point the
DEP
finger.
named them?
Yeah,
DEP is not, DEP is requiring the non-specified PRP to address the issue. DEP has said, if you need help with these other parties, do follow the regulations, try to get access, do everything you can. If you follow all the regs and you can't get access, we'll help you get access, because that's what DEP is there for. They can get access, they can go on those sites, they can do all kinds of testing. Even if they find data that they think convinces themselves that it's not them, they still have to convince DEP that it's not them. And DEP has to have a legitimate party to hold responsible. So that party is that non-specified PRP at this point. And based on all the data that I see, I don't see that grip being loosened at all. At all. The public water thing, I hear you, I agree with you. But I don't know where it's, I mean, it's not gonna go away.
How long can that go on? What's the, I mean, can that go on
It's like
for
indefinite,
5
right?
years?
So the MCP, the DEP regulations require closure of that issue in 5 years if feasible, if it's possible. Okay? The regulations, they have what's called they're gonna have a phase 1, a site assessment report due 1 year from notification. So October, whatever the date was, they're gonna, or September, October, they're gonna owe a pretty good report to DEP. And then within 5 years, they're supposed to have the issue addressed and closed, if you can. Sorry.
So, well, your last question, I'm just thinking about it a little bit. You said, what's your plan for municipal water? And I said, I don't think, we don't have a plan, right? I think I spoke just a little off on that, and I don't know, John, I'll ask you, Willie, and I'll ask you too, so start thinking about your plans, but I think what I'm hoping for is, I'm waiting, which after he just said 5 years is a bad way to explain this to you right now, but I'm waiting or hoping that DEP says, you need to do this. And I think at this point, that's what I believe my plan is I'm hoping that sooner than later, DEP is gonna say, no, you gotta get this problem solved. And I think that's, you know, the towns aren't, you know, we're not having weekly discussions on who's doing that, you know, and I don't know what it's gonna take for that, but I think right now, you know, what's the plan? It's kinda like, let's see what DEP says.
You putting any
Personally-
pressure on DEP, is the board?
The only pressure that we've been putting on the board from myself through Gary is the constant, every time we have a board meeting, right back to his contact, me and Mr. Douse, saying, hey, what about the water? Public water, courtesy bottled water. I mean, we keep talking about this potential critical exposure pathway to them. So it's not, I mean, how many times you talk to Mr. Douse in a,
He calls me when we get the detections to keep me informed.
yeah.
And I always turn right around, and the first thing I say is, thanks for informing us. Our major concern is making sure that residents are drinking clean water. It's, you're not gonna like this, but I'm gonna say it.